The sound was a crack of lightning in the sterile, hushed corridor of the fourth floor. It was sharp, wet, and utterly final. For a full second, the only thing Alara felt was the vibration of it in her jawbone, a deep hum that traveled up to her temple and down her throat. Then came the heat, a bloom of fire spreading across her left cheek, fierce and insulting. Her skin screamed. Mr. Harrison stood before her, his hand still slightly raised, his face a mask of pinched, entitled fury. His manicured fingers, adorned with a heavy gold signet ring, slowly curled back into a fist. The air, thick with the scent of antiseptic and floor wax, seemed to crystallize around them. A passing orderly froze mid-step, her plastic-soled shoes squeaking once before falling silent. Two other nurses at the station stared, their faces pale and slack with disbelief. "Do you understand me now, nurse?" Harrison's voice was low, but it carried the weight of his position as the hospital's CEO. It was a voice accustomed to absolute obedience, a voice that purchased compliance and discarded anything that displeased it. "When I ask for a patient's chart, I don't mean in 5 minutes. I don't mean after you finish your little chat. I mean now." Alara's training kicked in before her shock could. Her posture remained straight, her hands steady at her sides. She didn't touch her face, though the impulse to cradle the stinging flesh was a physical ache. She met his gaze. His eyes were the color of washed-out denim, cold and empty of anything resembling remorse. He was not a man who regretted his actions, only their consequences, and in this sterile kingdom he had built, there were none for him. "I understand, sir," she said. Her voice was level, a testament to years of handling screaming patients and grieving families. It was the voice of competence under pressure. But inside, a tremor had started, a seismic shift deep in her foundation. He gave a sharp, dismissive nod, his expensive suit shifting without a wrinkle. He looked past her as if she had already ceased to exist, turning on his heel and striding down the hallway, his polished leather shoes clicking a rhythm of unchallenged authority on the linoleum. The spell broke. The orderly scurried away. The nurses at the station suddenly found their computer screens intensely fascinating. Alara stood alone in the silence he left behind. The heat on her cheek was no longer just a physical sensation. It was a brand. Humiliation. She felt the invisible print of his fingers, of his ring, seared into her skin. She was a professional. A damn good one. She'd spent 3 years on this floor, working double shifts, calming the terrified, holding the hands of the dying. She was respected. She was capable. And in 3 seconds, he had reduced her to nothing. She took a slow, deliberate breath, tasting copper in her mouth. She walked to the nurse's station, her movements measured and calm. She picked up the chart Harrison had demanded and placed it in the designated rack. Her colleagues, a kind woman named Maria and a younger nurse, then refused to look at her. Their pity felt worse than Harrison's anger. It was a confirmation of her powerlessness in this world. His world. "Alara, are you?" Maria started, her voice a hesitant whisper. "I'm fine," Alara said, the words feeling like gravel in her throat. She didn't want their sympathy. She didn't want this moment to become a piece of hospital gossip, a cautionary tale whispered in the break room. She wanted it to be erased. She finished her shift. Every smile to a patient felt like a lie. Every gentle touch a betrayal of the rage coiling in her gut. She went through the motions with surgical precision, her professionalism a shield against the internal chaos. But every time she caught her reflection in a glass pane or a polished steel instrument tray, she saw it. The faint, angry red blooming on her cheekbone, a visible mark of her shame. The thought of telling Jinwoo was a live wire she refused to touch. Her husband existed in a different universe. A world of shadows and steel, of loyalty written in blood and power measured in silence. When she was with him, the sterile, predictable world of the hospital faded into a distant memory. And when she was here, his world felt like a dark, dangerous dream. She had fought to keep those worlds separate. A thick, impenetrable wall between the woman who checked vitals and the woman who slept beside an emperor. Driving home, the city lights of Los Angeles blurred into streaks of neon. She lived with him in a sleek, minimalist penthouse in Koreatown that overlooked the sprawling metropolis. It was a fortress of glass and quiet luxury, a place so removed from her daily life that the commute often felt like passing through a dimensional rift. She let herself in, the heavy silence of the apartment wrapping around her. He wasn't home yet. A small mercy. She went straight to the bathroom, the cool marble under her feet a small comfort. She stared at her reflection under the bright, unforgiving lights. The redness had deepened, a faint purple undertone beginning to surface. It wasn't a dramatic bruise, not yet. But it was unmistakable. It was a stain. She tried to cover it with concealer, her fingers trembling slightly. The makeup felt slick and wrong against her tender skin. It was a poor mask, a flimsy lie. She knew the moment he saw her, he would know. Jin-woo didn't just look at her, he saw her. He noticed the slightest shift in her posture, the faintest tremor in her voice. He read the landscape of her body like a map he had memorized. Hiding this from him was impossible. She heard the soft electronic chime of the front door. Her heart seized. She stayed in the bathroom, her back to the door, pretending to wash her hands. She heard his footsteps, quiet and deliberate, on the polished concrete floors. He moved like the world owed him space. "Alara," he said. His voice was a low baritone, calm and devoid of accent. It was a voice that could command a room of lethal men with a single word. She turned off the water, drying her hands on a plush black towel. She kept her face angled away from him, toward the mirror, as if inspecting something in her eye. "Hey, long day." He didn't answer immediately. The silence between them was not empty. It was active, a living thing. She could feel his presence behind her, the warmth of his body, the scent of his cologne, a subtle, clean fragrance of cedar and smoke. He was still for a long moment. She knew he was watching her reflection. "Turn around," he said. It wasn't a request. Her breath hitched. Slowly, she turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, a black Tom Ford suit tailored to his lean, powerful frame. His white shirt was immaculate, his tie a slash of dark silk. His face was a study in stillness, features carved from stone, his dark eyes holding an unnerving intelligence. Those eyes missed nothing. They swept over her face once, and then they stopped, locking onto her left cheek. The air in the room grew cold. The change was palpable, a drop in pressure that made the hairs on her arms stand up. His expression didn't change. He didn't frown. He didn't scowl. But something in his eyes shifted, a light going out, replaced by a flat, predatory darkness. It was the look he got right before violence happened, a quiet gathering of force that was more terrifying than any shout. He stepped forward, his movements economical and smooth. He gently cupped her chin, his thumb brushing near the edge of the bruise. His touch was featherlight, a stark contrast to the coiled tension radiating from his body. "Who?" he asked. The word was barely a whisper, a piece of chipped ice. Alara's throat went dry. The lie she had prepared, a clumsy story about bumping into a cabinet, died on her tongue. Lying to Jin-woo was like trying to hide a star in an empty sky. Futile. "It's nothing," she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. "My boss was having a bad day. It's not a big deal." His eyes remained fixed on the mark. "His name, Jin-woo, please. It's my world. My problem. I can handle it. I'll file a report with HR tomorrow." The words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Human resources. The concept felt laughably quaint, a child's toy, standing here in the face of his absolute cold. He let go of her chin, his hand dropping to his side. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and she saw a flicker of something ancient and painful in his gaze. It was the wound he never spoke of, the ghost of a woman from his past, a failure he carried like shrapnel in his soul. He had failed to protect someone once. He had sworn it would never happen again. That unspoken oath was the bedrock of their marriage, a dark and binding covenant. "You believe a report will suffice," he stated. It wasn't a question. It was a judgment on the pathetic inadequacy of her world solutions. "You believe the man who did this will face a consequence equal to the act. It's how things are done," she insisted, feeling foolish. He gave a slow, deliberate blink. Not in ours. That was it. He turned and walked out of the bathroom. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam a door. He simply moved through the apartment to his study. Alara followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She watched as he sat behind his large mahogany desk and picked up his phone. He made a call, speaking in quiet, fluid Korean. She didn't understand the language, but she understood the tone. It was the sound of orders being given, the sound of a machine of vengeance being set in motion. When he hung up, he looked at her. "What is his name, Alara?" he asked again, his voice patient, inexorable. She sank into one of the leather chairs opposite his desk, the fight draining out of her. She had tried to keep the wall up, but Harrison hadn't just slapped her, he had punched a hole right through it. And now, her husband's world was pouring in. "Robert Harrison," she whispered. "He's the CEO of the hospital." Jinwoo nodded once, as if she had merely confirmed a piece of data. He didn't say another word about it that night. He was calm, attentive. He poured her a glass of wine. He asked about her patients. He was the man she had married, the quiet, intense man who made her feel like the only person in the universe. But underneath it all, the coldness simmered. She could feel it, a promise of what was to come. She went to sleep that night with a sense of profound and terrifying dread. She had unleashed something she could not control. The next day at the hospital was agonizing. The air was thick with unspoken words. Maria kept looking at her with worried eyes. Ben avoided her altogether. The bruise on her cheek was darker now, a mottled stain of purple and blue that no amount of makeup could hide. Every whisper felt like it was about her. Every stare felt like an accusation. She kept expecting a call from HR, a summons to an office. Nothing happened. Harrison was not on the floor. His absence was a heavy, looming presence. She told herself it was survival instinct that made her check her phone every few minutes. A lie. She was waiting. She was watching the clock. Just after 2 in the afternoon, it happened. The hushed, orderly rhythm of the 4th floor was broken by the arrival of the elevator. The door slid open with a soft chime, and 3 men stepped out. The sight of them sucked the air from the hallway. Jinwoo was in the center. He wore another impeccably tailored suit, this one the color of charcoal. He moved with a predatory grace that was utterly alien to this environment of sickness and healing. On either side of him were 2 men she recognized from the periphery of his life. They were his lieutenants, both large, silent men with impassive faces and eyes that saw everything. They were specters from her other world, now made terrifyingly real under the fluorescent lights of her workplace. They didn't look like visitors. They looked like they owned the building. Nurses and doctors froze. Conversations died. A food service cart stopped rolling. The entire floor fell into a stunned, absolute silence, broken only by the distant, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. Jinwoo's gaze swept the floor, calm and assessing. It found the nurse's station. It found her. He didn't smile. He didn't gesture. He just looked at her, and in that look, there was a universe of meaning. It was a question, an affirmation, and a claim all at once. "This is who I am. This is what I do for you." Alara's blood ran cold. This was it. The wall was gone, turned to dust. She made a choice. She could have looked away, pretended she didn't know him, tried to salvage some piece of her old life. But she didn't. She held his gaze. In that moment, she crossed a line she could never uncross. She was not just Alara, the competent nurse. She was Alara Kwan, the wife of the man who commanded this terrifying silence. Jinwoo gave the barest of nods, a signal so small only she would have caught it. Then he turned his attention to a passing doctor. "Robert Harrison's office," Jinwoo said. His voice was quiet, but it sliced through the silence like a scalpel. The doctor, a senior cardiologist who normally strode the halls with an air of untouchable importance, paled. He swallowed hard. The executive suites are on the top floor." "Thank you," Jinwoo said, the courtesy a chilling counterpoint to the menace radiating from him and his men. They moved toward the far elevators, the ones reserved for staff and executives. They walked past the nurse's station. As Jinwoo passed her, His eyes met hers again for a fraction of a second. The message was clear. Stay here. But she couldn't. This was happening in her space, in her world. She was a participant whether she wanted to be or not. After a moment's hesitation, she followed, keeping a safe distance. She saw Maria's wide, terrified eyes on her, and she knew nothing would ever be the same. She took the stairs, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She emerged on the top floor just as the elevator doors were closing behind them. The executive wing was a different world. Plush carpets, expensive art on the walls, quiet mahogany doors with brass nameplates. It was the den of power. Harrison's office was at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. Jin-woo didn't knock. He pushed it open and walked inside. His two men took up positions on either side of the doorway, turning to face the hall. They were sentinels. No one was getting in or out. Alara crept closer, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. She could see inside through the gap in the doorway. Harrison was behind his massive desk, a sprawling vista of the city behind him. He looked up from his computer, his expression annoyed, impatient. "Can I help you?" "This is a private office," he said, his voice clipped. Jin-woo walked to the center of the room and stood there, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. He surveyed the office, the expensive furniture, the awards on the wall, with a look of mild disinterest. "Mr. Robert Harrison," Jin-woo said. His voice was conversational, almost gentle. Harrison's annoyance deepened. "I am. And you are?" "I am a husband," Jin-woo replied simply. A flicker of confusion crossed Harrison's face. "The husband of who?" "If you have a complaint, you need to go through the proper channels." Jin-woo took a step closer to the desk. "Yesterday, on the 4th floor, you put your hand on my wife." The color drained from Harrison's face. Recognition dawned, followed swiftly by a wave of disbelief, and then a flush of indignant anger. He pushed his chair back, trying to regain his footing of authority. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he blustered. "Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." Jin-woo smiled. It was a terrifying thing, a slight, cold curve of his lips that held no warmth, no humor, only a deep, chilling certainty. "You will not be calling anyone. Your phone lines have been disconnected. The security chief for this hospital is a man who owes my family a significant debt. He is currently enjoying a coffee in the cafeteria, and he will remain there until I am finished here." Harrison stared, his mouth slightly agape. The edifice of his power, built on rules and hierarchies he controlled, was crumbling before his eyes. This man played by a different set of rules entirely. "My wife," Jin-woo continued, his voice dropping even lower, becoming more intimate, more menacing, "is a good nurse. She is kind. She came to your hospital to heal people, not to be assaulted by a weak man who mistakes his title for strength." "That is an outrageous accusation." Harrison sputtered, half rising from his chair. "Is it?" Jin-woo moved with startling speed. He wasn't running. He simply closed the distance, his hand shooting out to grip the front of Harrison's expensive tie, yanking him forward over the desk. Papers scattered. A pen holder clattered to the floor. "Look at me," Jin-woo commanded, his voice now a venomous hiss. "You're going to walk out of this office. You will go to the 4th floor nurse's station. You will find Alara Kwan, and you will apologize to her in front of her colleagues. You will tell them you were wrong. You will tell them you are resigning your position, effective immediately, for personal reasons." Harrison choked, his eyes bulging. "I will do no such thing. You're insane." Jin-woo's grip tightened. "You misunderstand your position. This is not a negotiation. You have two choices. You can do exactly as I have said, or my associates and I can take you from this building. If that happens, the next time your board of directors hears your name, it will be in a police report filed from a hospital bed in a much less prestigious facility than this one. And your resignation will be tendered for you, along with a detailed account of your financial indiscretions, which my people have spent the last 12 hours compiling. The choice is yours, but you will make it now." He released the tie, shoving Harrison back into his chair. The CEO gasped for air, his face a mottled red and white. He stared at Jin-woo, at the two silent giants in the doorway, and the full, horrifying scope of his situation finally landed on him. He was a king in his castle, but a more powerful king had just walked through his gates and rendered his entire kingdom meaningless. Alara watched from the hallway, her hand pressed against her mouth. This was what he was. Not just a wealthy businessman, not just a powerful figure. He was a force of nature, a quiet, lethal storm that erased whatever stood in its path. And he had done this for her. For a slap. A cost is paid for everything in his world. She understood that now. The cost of his protection was the loss of her innocence, the death of the simple life she had tried so desperately to preserve. There was no going back. Harrison, trembling, slowly got to his feet. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, animal fear. He straightened his tie with shaking hands and walked, like a man in a trance, out of his office. He didn't even look at the two men as he passed them. He walked down the hall, his gaze fixed on the floor. Jinwoo followed him out. He stopped when he saw Alara standing there. He looked at her, his eyes dark and searching. He was giving her a final choice. She could walk away, back to the stairs, back to her floor, and pretend this was a nightmare. Or she could walk with him. She met his gaze and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The choice was made. It had been made the moment she held his gaze across the nurse's station. She fell into step beside him, and they followed Harrison down to the 4th floor. The scene was a tableau of frozen shock. Everyone was exactly where they had been, watching, waiting. Harrison walked directly to the nurse's station, his face ashen. Maria and Ben stared, their mouths open. He stopped in front of the desk. He looked at Alara, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and hatred. "Nurse Kwan," he began, his voice a hoarse croak. I want to apologize for my behavior yesterday. It was unprofessional and inexcusable. I was wrong," he took a ragged breath. "I am resigning my position as CEO, effective immediately." He turned and practically fled toward the elevators, a broken man. The silence he left in his wake was profound. Every eye was on Alara and on the terrifyingly calm man standing beside her. Jinwoo looked at her, his expression unreadable. He had torn down her world to protect her. Now he was waiting to see if she would help him build a new one from the rubble. He offered her his arm, a simple, formal gesture that was, in this context, an act of absolute possession, a public claim. She took it. His arm was solid and warm under her hand. Together, they walked away from the nurse's station, away from her past, leaving the stunned silence and whispers behind them. They didn't say a word as they rode the elevator down to the ground floor and walked out into the bright California sun. The sterile, safe world of the hospital was behind them. His world, dangerous and absolute, lay ahead. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was a part of it.